When, and more importantly, why, should we use a lipless crankbait to find bass in the spring? Hi there, welcome to the Bass Fishing Life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers. Hey, before the video gets going, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and punch the notification bell. Videos come out 3 times per week. And also check out our blog site at thebassfishinglife.com. Thank you so very much. Well, just the other day I went down to my dock, and as a matter of fact, it was yesterday. It was about 60 degrees out. We're here in northern Illinois, and I had just rigged up a Ned rig, took it down to the dock, caught a fish in about 3 or 4 casts. That was awesome. So why in the world would I be throwing one of these in the springtime if I can pick up something like that Ned rig and go catch bass right away? Well, if you notice today, less than 24 hours later, the temperature has dropped about 20 degrees and it's overcast. That is why in the springtime, we need to be in search mode and find those staging areas, those pre-spawn areas, if we want to be consistent in our fishing in the early springtime. I would love to have great weather every single day, go out in the boat and have the fish up shallow, see them and they're up there in less than 4 foot of water and have an amazing time. But I'm sure in your area too, the weather seems to fluctuate constantly, and those bass in the pre-spawn are going to hold back in those staging spots until we get good, stable, warmer weather several days in a row, and then they're going to really start to move up, and that water temp, they're going to be up there in their shallowest when it gets above 60 degrees. But if that water temp is below that, they may come up for a little bit and go back down, and that is where these lipless crankbaits are so good at locating bass, and we've talked about this in other videos. But one thing that I've noticed is there's a lot of anglers that don't have a lot of confidence in this bait, fishing it jig style or fishing it like a jig. We've talked about that lipless crankbaits, of course, can be used as just a regular chunk and wind and, you know, burn it back and retrieve it straight back. They're going to catch fish for sure. But this bait really does its best work on the drop when it flutters on the way down and fished like a jig. So that's what I want to talk about today. What equipment are we going to use for that? How are we going to gain our confidence, especially if we've not done it a bunch, so we can go out there, cover water quickly, and locate those good pre-spawn locations where we can find those bass. So when the weather changes constantly, you know where to locate them. So that's what we're going to discuss. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is the retrieve. We have mentioned this in other videos in the past. I did one last fall on this, but I want to go over it again. So essentially, we want to retrieve this lipless crankbait like you would a jig. Okay, so you throw it out there, toss it out there, let it get to the bottom, and then just go ahead and pull that rod up, let it flutter up 3-4 times, rattle on its way up, and then let it drop. Boom, let it drop, flutter down, grab the bottom, grab the grass, do the same thing. It's like you're just hopping a jig all the way back to the boat. That is exactly the retrieve that we are looking for. Now, I mentioned earlier in the video, what can we do to gain confidence in this particular style of fishing a lipless crankbait? And by far the biggest thing that is most important is the feel. If you can feel what is going on, you are more likely to build confidence in it, throw it longer, and then of course catch fish. So probably the #1 thing that you can do if you want to gain the most confidence in this retrieval style is to make sure that you have braided line on. Braided line just increases your sensitivity so much. You're going to feel that lure if it gets caught up in some grass, if it gets a leaf stuck on it. You're going to feel the bites better. You're going to feel if you run into some rocks. So braided line is just going to give you, the angler, so much more sensitivity. And if you want, on here I've got a fluoro leader, okay, about 5-6 foot of fluorocarbon on here, because the lake that I fish most of the time is just crazy clear, so I feel more confident if I have a fluoro leader. But this setup with that braided line, you're going to feel what is going on so much better than if you were using, let's say, straight monofilament. So that's my #1 tip for you as far as building confidence in this particular presentation. Now, as far as the type of rod, there's 2 schools of thoughts here, and you're going to have to determine, based on the waters you fish most of the time, which one is going to be better for you. So a lot of anglers like to use a regular crankbait rod, okay, just like this. This one here is actually a 7.6. I've also got a 7-foot crankbait rod right here, and this is a composite rod. It's part glass, part graphite, and it's got more of a parabolic action. Okay, this one has got a moderate tip to it, and it's just a medium power rating on there, so I've got a lot more flex to the rod. So this is one that a lot of people like to use, a traditional crankbait setup, okay, especially when you're fishing trebles. It's nice to give those bass a little more give. The other one I've got rigged up here, this is more my traditional bottom bouncing jig rod. This is a medium heavy power rated rod, so the backbone goes farther up the length of the blank. And here's the difference between the two and what I have found, and you're going to have to determine what works best for the waters that you are fishing. This particular lake here has a ton of vegetation, and as a matter of fact, later in the summertime it comes all the way up to the top. It's not unusual for the weeds to be 10-15 feet tall and just super thick. Now right now, at the end of March, the vegetation has already started to grow. In a lot of areas it's about this high off of the bottom, and that's important to know for which rod I'm going to pick. When I have got the traditional crankbait rod, when this lure grabs the grass, grabs the vegetation, because it's more of a parabolic overall action, that lure is going to hold, and then pop free, almost like, I would say, a slingshot. It's building tension, boom, and then it pops free. With a medium heavy power rated rod, I have found in that vegetation that the lure more pulls free. I hope that makes sense, because you've got more backbone in a medium heavy rod. It's gonna pull through and eventually rip free, where the parabolic one, it holds longer as that rod is building tension, and then it pops free. So that is the big difference I've found between the medium power rating and the medium heavy power rating. A lot of guys like the medium or the crankbait rod because they feel that sudden pop gives them more of a true reaction strike when that lure rips free. But I found in the heavier vegetation, like later in the summer or late spring and into the fall, I need a little bit more backbone to rip that lure free out of there as that vegetation gets thicker. If the lake or river that you are fishing or a pond doesn't have much vegetation and it's a lot more rock, well then the traditional crankbait rod is going to work really, really well for you, because you're not getting stuck up in that green stuff down there. You're more just letting it hit the rocks and then bouncing it off. So like I said, you're going to have to determine what is best for the waters that you fish. And it seems that anglers that I talk to about this, they're about 50-50. Like half of them like more of that medium heavy power rating, and the other half like the crankbait rod. So just see what works best for you. But I highly suggest, if you're new to this technique, go with that braided line or braided to fluorocarbon leader, and you're going to feel a lot more of what is going on down there, and you're going to gain just a ton of confidence. And also you're going to want to experiment with some different models out there because the rattles are different. Okay, they might be small little BBs, they could have tungsten in there, maybe they've got only 1 or 2 rattles, or another one's got 3 or 4. So the different sound can make a big difference depending on the day. So make sure you experiment with that as well. Now, as far as color, today I plan on going out this afternoon, okay, get away for a few hours and go out and fish. And because it's overcast, I'm going to go with more of the solid or the dull patterns. Okay, this one, I'll be throwing this one quite a bit because we have a ton of bluegill in this lake and I like the chartreuse in it. And of course, Sexy Shad is just a good all-around color as well, but this one is dull, okay? It's not got that flash and shine to it. But if the sun comes out, even for a little bit, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to something that's got some more flash, okay? If you've ever noticed a bunch of schooling minnows or whatever on a bright sunny day, when they take off, they've got some shine to them. So when that sun comes out, I'm gonna go with more of a chrome type of a model. And if your lake has a lot of shad in it, of course, on an overcast day, just your solid white would be an excellent choice. But the color does make a big difference. Try to match it to the forage. If it's sunny out, you want some more shine and reflection. If it's overcast, you want some more muted, solid colors. So that is how I break down the colors that I'm going to use. And I've got 3 rods right here all rigged up. So when I go out this afternoon, depending what happens with the cloud cover, I can just put one down, pick up the other, and I'm good to go right away. Well, I hope that these tips on fishing the lipless crankbait in the spring, the fine staging bass, help you out and the retrieve, fish it like the jig. And hey, make sure you drop some comments below. What have you found? What are some of your best tips for fishing this lipless crankbait early in the spring when locating these pre-spawn bass? Hey, don't forget to go out and encourage someone today, because you never know what a difference you will make in their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.